All right, welcome folks. People are still joining through the link, so we're gonna give it a couple seconds before we get started. Okay, Shane, could you go to the next slide and I will get started with housekeeping?
Oh,
Oh, here, you're good.
one
Well, in the meantime, hello everyone. My name is Kessel John, and I am with ERG, a contractor supporting this effort, and I will be your Zoom host for this evening. So let me pull up.
Here, I have it.
Okay. All right, so interpretation, this meeting will be available with interpretation in American Sign Language or ASL, Portuguese, Vietnamese, Mandarin Chinese, and Haitian Creole, and Spanish. You can use the globe icon on your Zoom control panel, which is just the interpretation icon, to select your preferred language when I open up interpretation. English speakers should select English so they can hear any translated comments. I am now going to hand it over to Jose, who will go through these instructions with our interpreters.
Thank you very much. To begin, can we please begin with Portuguese?
Boa noite a todos. A reunião de hoje terá interpretação simultânea oferecida em espanhol, português, crioulo, vietnamita e mandarim. Para ativar o recurso de interpretação, clique no ícone de interpretação e selecione o idioma de sua preferência. Muito obrigado. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Haitian Creole.
Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Réunion aujourd'hui est disponible en langue sayo, espagnol, portugais, créole haïtien, ensemble avec langue signe américain. Et puis, créole haïtien, pour capable t'aider à réunion ça dans langue par qui c'est créole haïtien, ou sélectionner 3 petits points qui partent en bas ou bien icône globe là, et puis ou sélectionner interprétation, et puis choisir langue par là qui c'est créole haïtien pour capable t'aider réunion à créole haïtien. Merci à pile tout le monde. Haitian Creole completed.
Mandarin next, please.
本次会议提供西班牙语、葡萄牙语、海地奥里克尔语、越南语、普通话以及美国口语服务。如果您以普通话参加会议，请点击口语图标，选择中文。谢谢。Back to you, Jose.
Vietnamese next, please.
Một chút nữa thôi, khi ban tổ chức bật cái biểu tượng mà phiên dịch lên ấy, thì anh chị sẽ thấy là sẽ có kênh dịch tiếng Việt để anh chị chọn. Cho nên là cuộc họp hôm nay thì sẽ được tiến hành dịch song song bằng tiếng Tây Ban Nha, tiếng Bồ Đào Nha, tiếng Creative Haitian, tiếng Việt, tiếng Trung Quốc và ngôn ngữ ký hiệu Mỹ. Anh chị hãy click vào biểu tượng quả địa cầu và chọn kênh Vietnamese. Vietnamese completed.
Okay. Spanish. Bienvenidos. Esta noche la interpretación va a ser ofrecida en los siguientes idiomas: español, portugués, criollo haitiano, vietnamita, mandarín y lenguaje de señas en americano. Por favor, hablen lentamente. Todos los participantes tienen que escoger un idioma independiente que si quieran ver la presentación en inglés. Para seleccionar el idioma, hace clic al globo en la parte inferior de la aplicación Zoom. Selecciona su idioma para poder escuchar la sesión en el idioma adquirido. Gracias. Back to you, Castle.
Thank you. All right, now that our interpreters have explained what's going on in their languages, I'm going to open up the interpretation rooms. All right, you should have just seen a little globe icon pop up in your Zoom control panel. And Please select your language, and if you are going to be listening to this in English, please select English as well so you hear any translated comments. All right. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So first of all, please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted at a later date. English closed captioning is auto-generated and is available by clicking the CC icon in your Zoom control panel. If you cannot see this icon immediately, you should be able to hit the 3 dots, say more, and it should be somewhere in the panel that pops up. If you'd like to use telephone audio for this meeting, please click on the arrow next to the microphone icon, select Switch to Phone Audio, and follow the instructions provided. If you would like to submit questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A box. And for any technical questions, you can email meetings@erg.com, and I'll be putting that in the chat in a second. You can also just type something into the chat box and I'll help you with that.
I'm sorry, can you explain to a blind person how to do this using an iPhone that uses VoiceOver, please?
Would you like to see, what would you like to do?
English.
Okay. If you, I'm not sure about voice interpretation over, you should be able to hear most of the comments in English if you just stay in the main room, but
All right, I'll try that because I don't know what else to do but leave if I can't do anything. So, thank you.
I will get back to you once the
All right.
presentation gets started.
Thank
So
you.
give me a moment. If you would like to make additional comments beyond what's discussed today, it's a MassGov URL. Yes, and finally, we are asking participants to rename themselves if they are inclined to do so. This gives us a better idea of who you are. You can rename yourself by clicking on the participants icon, finding yourself, and then hitting the 3 dots to the right. You should see rename there. You can edit your name and add one of the 5 tags on the screen for the one that best describes you. You can use Trail User, Trail Builder, Government or Gov, Nonprofit or Other. And if you fall in like multiple of these categories, just pick whichever one you think is the closest or best describes you. Please let me know if you have any questions or issues with the Zoom throughout the night. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Great. Thank you, Kessel. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Janegi. I am the director of the Massachusetts Office of Outdoor Recreation. The Massachusetts Office of Outdoor Recreation is a relatively new office in the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and we are helping to facilitate this Trails for All initiative for the state. It's really amazing to see all of you here tonight. I'm so pleased at everybody who is choosing to join us for tonight and hear what the presentation has to offer and provide feedback so that we can move this Trails for All initiative forward. This is the second in our Trails for All public forum, so thank you again. And to give us a little bit more of a kickoff and welcome, I want to introduce Undersecretary for Environment, Stephanie Cooper. Stephanie is, as I said, Undersecretary of Environment at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and has been a long-term champion for all things getting outside, playing, experiencing natural spaces, and making sure that we expand access for everyone in Massachusetts. Stephanie?
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, everyone. I would add the same sentiments that I was just so excited to see so many people around the screen and just such a large number of folks who are taking the time to be part of this forum tonight. So thank you so much for your time and your engagement in what is such an important initiative. So as you know, Paul sort of got at this Trails for All. This initiative is about expanding accessible trails through thoughtful planning. It's about removing barriers growing the network, and really just making sure that everyone, regardless of their ability, can enjoy trails across Massachusetts. So that means hearing and learning from people with disabling conditions and other mobility considerations, and assessing the condition of accessible trails now, to ensure that those activities are available to people living with disabilities, low-income residents, and communities of color. I want to mention that the Office of Outdoor Recreation has, to support this initiative, has convened a trail access working group to advise and give guidance to this initiative, identifying barriers and making recommendations for how we expand accessible trails and adaptive outdoor recreation in Massachusetts. So I just want to thank and recognize all of the members of the Trail Access Working Group and thank them for all of their time and excellent brain power. And so this initiative and tonight too is about developing a vision, vision for trails across the state. How do we make them truly accessible and welcoming for everyone? What will it take? What does that vision look like? What does success look like? And how will we know and measure our progress toward reaching it? It's part of a bigger vision that the Healey-Driscoll administration has around outdoors for all in Massachusetts. And that's the notion that we want to have a Massachusetts where everyone is able to take part in outdoor recreation and connect with nature wherever they are and across the state. Related to this, I wanted to mention the Mass Ready Act, which is a $3 billion bond bill that Governor Healey mentioned in June. And I'm talking about it now because it's actually part of realizing an outdoors for all and a trails for all vision. The bill is pending with the legislature, and it will support capital investments in all types of environmental projects and programs. So this bill is about strengthening infrastructure, supporting local communities, and protecting water and nature. I would argue that all three of those pillars apply very well to accessible trails. So the bill will set the table for historic investment in the environment, including in accessible trails. So it's something important for this community to pay attention to. So I would urge you to take a look at it, engage if you haven't already, and advocate to our state legislators about the importance of passing this bill. And with that, I will pass. I think I'm passing back to Shane, correct?
Thank you. Passing back, yes, Secretary, thank you. And I am going to cover, thank you very much for giving us a welcome tonight. I am going to give us a brief overview of what our agenda is for tonight, and then a couple of slides describing the Trails for All initiative. So we've had our welcome. You are all here. And again, you're taking your time out on your Monday evening to join us, and we really appreciate that. As I said, this is the second in our public forums, and so we are going to have some sharing of what we learned at our first public forum and what we've learned with our Trail Access Working Group about the needs, barriers, and opportunities for Trails for All vision. We do have a draft vision to share with you tonight, and also some beginning high-level draft recommendations that we're working towards. And there will be opportunities for your input and interaction throughout the forum tonight. So again, thank you. And hopefully we will have you out of here by 8 p.m. Just to remind everybody about the Trails for All initiative, it aims to create universally accessible trails through intentional trail planning that removes barriers to access and brings the outdoors to individuals of all abilities via trail improvements such as managed grades, stable surfaces, inclusive signage, and more accessible information about trails in Massachusetts. I added that piece. The key objectives of this initiative are to really dig in to identify the range of trail experiences that are desired by the public in Massachusetts. It's really important that everybody brings their own perspective to accessibility and accessible trails and their own needs. And so it's important that we don't have one kind of trail accessibility because it doesn't meet all. So we're really looking at the whole range. We're working to identify the critical barriers to expanding accessibility and high quality accessible experiences How can we make this an easier road for us to do more in building accessible trails? We're working to identify what the resources are that are necessary to provide that range of experiences in Massachusetts. We are intentionally engaging in this effort not for, but by and with people with lived experience with disabling conditions. And in that vein, we really hope to cultivate a culture of recognition that accessible trails cannot be created or expanded or maintained without input and partnership from people with lived experience with disabilities.
Thank you, Paul. So my name is Shane Muehlmester. I am with Dodson and Flinker, which is a consulting firm out in Western Massachusetts, and I've been helping support this project. So we would like to next just ask some questions just to get a sense of who is in the Zoom room with us tonight. So Kessel, could you please put the first question up? Okay, so the first question is, do you recreate on accessible hiker/pedestrian trails? And our answer options are, and if the translators could read these out for me, that'd be great. Yes, regularly is the first option. The second is yes, occasionally. The third is no, I'm familiar with accessible trails, but don't use them or don't use them often. And the fourth is no, I'm not familiar with accessible trails / I'm not sure if I've ever used an accessible trail. And I'll give folks a minute to answer this.
And Shane, sorry to break in. If any of our blind attendees would like to verbally state their answers, we can add that to our notes when we tabulate the results.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so 30% of the people in the room regularly use accessible trails. 48% occasionally use them. 21% are familiar with them, but don't use them or don't use them often. And 2% are not familiar with accessible trails or are not sure if they've ever used them. So welcome to everyone, no matter your background or experience with the subject matter, we are happy you are here. And next question, Kessel. So this question says, how would you describe your use of accessible hiker/pedestrian trails? The first answer is, I rely on accessible trails for access to nature. The second is, I use accessible trails but do not rely on them. The third is, I design, build, or maintain accessible trails. The fourth is, I use accessible trails for professional reasons, such as hosting outdoor programs or events. And the fifth is, I do not use accessible trails, or I am not sure if I have. Okay, and again, it looks like a nice healthy mix of participants. So we have about 25% of people who rely on accessible trails for access to nature. The majority, 58%, use accessible trails but do not rely on them. 20% design, build, or maintain trails. 12% use accessible trails for professional reasons, and 3% do not use them or are not sure if they have. So that's been a big intention of this project from the get-go, is to really bring together trail users, those with disabling conditions, those who just love to get out into nature, and those who design, build, and maintain trails. And so it's really this mix of perspectives that makes this project. Hopefully our recommendations will be strong. Okay, and the third question, Kessel? So this says, are any of the below statements true for you? First is, I identify as having a disability. The second is, I have experienced periods of limited mobility or disabling conditions in the past, but do not currently identify as having a disability. And the third is I have a family member or loved one with a disability or limited mobility. And fourth is none of the above. Okay, great. So we have about 37% of participants who identify as having a disability, 29% who have experienced periods of limited mobility or disabling conditions in the past, 43% who have a family member or loved one with a disability or limited mobility, and 21% none of the above. So for those of you who identify as having a disability or have so in the past, or who frequently accompany a family member, we are really excited to hear what you have to think tonight about our vision and recommendations and to ensure that they align with your own experience and needs. So thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing. And then I will pass it over to Meg.
Thank you so much, Shane. My name is Meg Bandera, and I'm the founder of Unpaved Trails for All, which is a disability-led volunteer cohort of advocates who are pushing for more and better accessible trails in the state. I'm also part of the Trails for All work group. And I'm going to talk about who uses accessible trails. It sounds like we have a good mix of folks who, some of whom may not be familiar with trails. And I think there's a misconception sometimes that it's just a few folks who need trails like this. But in fact, it's 36 to 49% of Massachusetts residents. They're in a category that can benefit from accessible trails. That includes older adults, people who are over age 65, people with disabling conditions, and those who have small children. And because we use some census and CDC data, we categorize young children as below age 5. In Massachusetts, 26% of adults have a disabling condition, whether it be mobility, visual, auditory, or cognitive, or anything else under the spectrum of disability. And then almost, that's about 1.5 million people in the state, just adults who identify as having a disability. And then according to the CDC, 28.7% of adults nationally have a disabling condition. And then next slide, please, Shane. And then a little bit more about who uses accessible trails. Just named 3 groups, but if we dive into one of those a little bit more, that's 44% of adults who are ages 65 plus identify as having a disability. And last year, Massachusetts was actually the #1 destination for people to chose to come to for retirement. So not Florida, not a southern warm state, but Massachusetts, people are choosing to come to retire. And between 2020 and 2030, the population of people over age 65 in Massachusetts is expected to increase from 15 to 21% of the total population. And we're already at about 19%, so we are getting there. And then interest in outdoor recreation among older adults is actually growing quite a bit. 39.5% of people who are age 65 plus participate in outdoor recreation, and those numbers came from 2023. Next slide, please, Shane. There are a lot of benefits to being in nature, health benefits, and studies show that spending time in nature benefits health and well-being and reduces stress. And the more natural an environment, the greater that stress-reducing benefit. And that's really important, particularly for people who have disabilities. Next slide, please. because people with mobility disabilities are 33% more likely to develop stress-related illnesses than their non-mobility limited peers. And that's not because of disability, it's because people with disabilities have more stress in their lives. And that, it says mobility disabilities, but that actually includes folks who have any sort of barrier to their mobility. So if you have a visual disability or you use a mobility device like a walker or wheelchair, that counts for this statistic. So any type of barrier that prevents you from moving as freely as you would necessarily like through our society. And in 2023, Massachusetts spent $23.5 billion with a B dollars on preventable healthcare costs. And one of the things I think it's very important to think about when it comes to trails and natural recreation spaces is that they are beneficial to public health. And it's estimated that spending $1 on trails can save up to $3 in medical costs. Next slide, please. And then outdoor recreation is also an economic driver. In Massachusetts, we have the fastest growing outdoor recreation industry in the nation. In 2023, it was valued at $13.2 billion. And from 2022 to 2023, it's actually grown 13.3%. And since 2012, it's grown 73%. Accessible adaptive travel is also a growing market. It is valued at, according to a 2020 report, it was valued at $58.7 billion, and continued growth is expected when the next report comes out. And next slide, please. And then in Massachusetts, we have over 4,000 miles of unpaved trails in our state parks, but only 7.5 miles are accessible. That is 0.2%, so not a lot. And then overall, less than 0.5% of trails in Massachusetts are accessible, and that would be paved or unpaved trails. Still not a lot of our trails. And I think one of just the most important things to remember, going back to the first slide that I presented, is these are multi-generational, everybody spaces, regardless of age or ability. Next slide. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Shane. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Meg.
Sure.
So as Undersecretary Cooper mentioned, this has been a months-long effort so far, and we convened a public forum back in May. We got to hear from a lot of you back then. But along the way, we've also had this Trail Access Working Group, which has been hugely influential to our thinking about this issue. And this is a 24-member multi-stakeholder advisory group, which is composed of people who have disabilities. About 1/3 of our members have disabilities. We also have staff members from Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Universal Access Program, Massachusetts Office on Disability, Mass Wildlife. We have some adaptive recreation providers, as well as nonprofit trail and land trust organizations, professional trail builders, and municipal and regional planners and officials. So in a second, I will pass it over to Peter to talk about the listening session results from our forum back in May. But as you listen to the recommendations and vision later on, I also just wanted to provide some context about some of the voices that have been contributing to this work so far.
Thanks, Shane. This is Peter Flinker. I'm part of the consulting team with Shane and Meg, and it's really been a privilege to work with the working group and to meet all of you. Part of what you're here tonight is a vision that's based on a lot of input that we've had over the last months, and that really started with a public forum we had last spring. And I'm just going to quickly give you some of the highlights of that. First was the top needs that were mentioned. One was surfacing. Obviously, fundamental to using accessible trails are having firm and stable surfaces with adequate width and clear trail edges that don't interfere with the physical use of the trail. Safety was also raised as an important need. Safe road crossings so you can get to the trail, barriers to keep you on the trail so you don't fall off, indicators of dips and other changes in the tread surface of the trail, lighting at night, emergency communications, so that if you do find yourself lost or off the trail, you could get help. And then trails which maybe are not open to bikers, so they're safer for people who are walking slowly or using adaptive devices. Other needs we heard about were amenities such as accessible parking, accessible restrooms, rest areas, shade, trash and recycling bins, and supports for stability. And then you'll also hear more tonight about the need for better information, descriptions of trails that are in plain language that anyone can understand, information that's consistent, so trails are described the same way from place to place and from different materials, and then clear signage on the trail itself, including multilingual, multisensory, and digital signage. We heard a lot about the need for an environment for trails that's different than our normal everyday life in cities and towns. So that's an immersion in nature, access to water, scenic viewpoints that are accessible early in the trail. Quietness is very important. And then experience of sort of multi-sensory experience, which we've been hearing a lot about in terms of hearing birds and wildlife and the sounds of nature, being able to feel it and so on. And then proximity is an important need, having a trail that you can actually reach, which means perhaps a trail in your neighborhood. The next slide talks about the barriers that we heard about. Again, surfacing sort of led the list with a lot of trails that may have been built to be accessible. The surface is degraded. Vegetation can quickly overgrow the edges and encroach on the trail, and there could be roots or other obstructions that appear. We also heard about literal barriers in the form of boulders and bollards that are often placed at a trail entrance to keep motorized vehicles out, but also create a challenge for people with accessible devices. We also heard that it can be challenging to find the trailhead. They're often not very well marked and not at the end of a clear route. We heard that it can be difficult to find assistance in terms of guides that can help with use of the trail. And again, one of the barriers was the lack of information. So not knowing that accessible trails even exist or where to find them or where to find information about them. And then having that information be outdated or inaccurate or fragmented across different sites and applications. And then again, the problem of inconsistent descriptions of different trail conditions. We also heard about safety as a barrier again, lack of emergency communications being something that will keep people away, and then not having staff available. And then we've talked a lot about the barrier of inadequate transportation to trails, that people can't get to them. There's a lack of public transit, difficult without an address often to take a taxi or an Uber. And then if you're walking, there's infrastructure adjacent to the trails in terms of local intersections, sidewalks, and so on, often doesn't extend to the trail itself. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about another thing we've been doing this summer, which is visiting trails with the consulting team and members of the working group and people with a lived experience of a disability. And we've visited a number of trails. The next slide shows some of the things we've heard and seen on the trails and been able to document. Again, barriers which include lack of restrooms, long, steep runs of trails that are difficult to use, or hot, exposed stretches of trails without shade. Seating areas, again, there's a photograph here of a bench being covered by vegetation, and we all know how quickly the vegetation can grow over the course of a summer, which can quickly make a bench inaccessible. And in other areas, often the scenic vistas or viewpoints off a trail are sometimes inaccessible from the accessible portion of the trail. Other barriers we heard about on the next slide, eroded surfacing, cross slopes that are too steep, even though the linear slope of a trail may be accessible, cross slopes often get too steep. We found that surfaces which may have been installed correctly have been patched with aggregate that is an incorrect size, so you no longer have the traction that you need. Or on boardwalks in particular, often we've seen problems with rotting boardwalks, nails and screws pulling loose, and boardwalks no longer being functional. And then again, vegetation growing into the path system. It's not all bad news. We did identify some highlights for design, and these again are going to go into our list of things recommended for future trails and put into a list of best practices. One is to have viewing spots that are frequent and easy to use, and to have a variety of experiences along the trail. So I think the best trails we visited go through forest, open spaces, views, viewpoints, different surfacing that really give you a sense of being away from home again and experiencing nature in different ways. And of course, we've seen some problems with trails, but a lot of trails that have really good, stable, firm surfaces, and those are going to become models as we go forward. And then finally, shade, which is comfortable and sort of a balance of shade and sun and real immersion in nature. So you get a sense of not just sort of seeing the forest, but experiencing the sense of being in the forest with the cool and the smell and the wonderful sense of being in nature. I think that goes back to you now, Shane.
Yes, thank you, Peter. So next we'd like to turn to presenting our draft vision statement. What is a vision statement? A vision statement is a snapshot of a point in time. In this case, we've chosen a point in time 10 years from now. And it's a description of what we want our trail network to look like at that time. So it tries to paint a picture of the overall destination that we are working towards together. A good vision is aspirational, inspiring, and easy to understand. And it's something that someone who picks up the report that our project will produce at the end of this project, at a glance can read the vision and know exactly what we were aspiring for, what values this group had, and what we want our trail network to look like. So I'm going to read out the vision. It's a little long, so please bear with me. And as you listen, I'd like you to think about the following questions. Consider, does this vision reflect your hopes and needs for the trail network? Is anything missing? Do you think it captures, based on the feedback that we've just presented, which we've received from public, but also your own personal experience, do you feel like it captures the most important points? And then we'll have some poll questions for you at the end, and then we can discuss. So, in 2035, Massachusetts Trail Network is a national model for equitable, sustainable, and inclusive access to nature, as people of all abilities enjoy immersive, safe, barrier-free trails designed with lived experience at the center. Recognizing that trails strengthen mental and physical health, support local economies, and protect wildlife by creating safe, sustainable ways for people to connect with nature, Massachusetts has invested in a trail network that delivers these benefits for everyone. The trail system offers diverse experiences, whether quiet reflection, social outings, wildlife viewing, or educational and cultural exploration. Designed by and for people with mobility, sensory, developmental, and cognitive disabilities, the network ensures that every resident and visitor can connect with the natural world and enjoy outdoor recreation in a meaningful way. Crushed stone and boardwalk trails provide firm, stable surfaces through diverse natural settings. They are long enough to provide an immersive experience in nature, wide enough to travel with a companion, and have grades that meet a variety of users' needs. Supportive amenities such as accessible restrooms, seating at regular intervals, and shade make trail visits comfortable and enjoyable. Features like tactile guides, edging, and guardrails enable access for those with low vision or blindness. Through coordinated local, regional, and state planning, most residents live within 20 minutes of a trail. Particular attention has been paid to prioritizing trails in communities with high rates of disabilities and limited access to outdoor recreation, resulting in greater trail equity across the state. Trails are easy to find and well documented, with a centralized source of accurate trail information. All trails, whether accessible or not, provide clear, accurate accessibility information so that users can plan experiences confidently. As a result, residents enjoy the health, wellness, and stress reduction benefits of spending more time outdoors. The investment in outdoor recreation also pays economic dividends for communities and local businesses, as Massachusetts is recognized as an outdoor destination. State leadership, municipalities, and trail organizations have made this possible through legislation, funding, streamlined permitting, and shared educational and training resources. At all levels of planning and implementation, the voices of those with lived experience of disabilities have been at the center. Massachusetts is proud to be a place where everyone, regardless of ability or neighborhood, can enjoy outdoor recreation and connect with nature to experience its physical, mental, and social benefits. Our trail network is a testament to our shared values of equity, inclusion, dignity, and access to nature as a human right, and is an enduring resource for current and future generations. All right. So, we won't necessarily be revising this vision in real time tonight, but we do want to just get your overall feedback and then hear about, as I said, is anything missing, and does this align with your own personal values and hopes? So Kessel, could you put the first poll question up? So this question asks, is the vision statement easy to understand? The first answer is not at all, second is somewhat, third is yes, and fourth is no opinion. And as I said, being a vision statement should ideally be easy to understand so that anyone in a general audience would be able to read it and understand what we're going for. So it sounds like 4%. Actually, I'll give people another minute because results are still trickling in. Someone in the chat says it's too long. Feedback received, and someone agrees. We have talked about having in our final report kind of a long version of the vision and then a short version. So the long vision kind of spells out like all of our top priorities, but yes, I'm good to get all this feedback that the length is a concern. So 3% say it's not at all helpful, 34% say somewhat helpful, 58% say yes, and 5% don't have an opinion. And someone in the chat said an abstract version would be helpful. By that, I assume she means like a shortened version. All right. Kessel, could you put the next question up? So this question says, for those who identify as having a disability, does this vision reflect your personal hopes and needs for the trail network? The first answer is not at all. The second is somewhat. The third is yes. And the fourth is no opinion. We have a comment that we left out neurological disability. It's a good point. So we have a comment that crushed stone is unsafe. So we will have time for more kind of open dialogue about all these concerns in a moment. Okay, so about 9% say it does not at all reflect their hopes or needs for Trail Network. So we'll be eager to hear from you all. 18% say somewhat, 36% say yes, and 36% do not have an opinion. All right, someone says the language is clear but too general. These ideas could mean anything. So there's a wish for more specificity. And also a wish to include chronic medical issues. Oh, sorry, I think I did not share those results. So those are I'm sharing the results from the second question now. And Kessel, could you put up the third question?
Yes, I do. I will have to stop sharing these results to put up the next one, though.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
great.
Okay, and this says, for everyone to answer, does this vision address the biggest opportunities, in your opinion, to improve the trail network? The first answer is not at all. The second is somewhat. Then yes. And lastly, no opinion. Okay, so 2% of people say not at all, 48% say somewhat, 43% say yes, and 7% do not have an opinion. Okay, and the last question, Kessel. So this says, for everyone, how well does this vision capture what you would like to see for the future of Massachusetts Trail Network? And this is a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all and 5 meaning very well. Okay, so the highest percentage of people rated it as a 4 with 45%. 5% said not at all. 9% gave it a 2, 22% gave it a 3, 45% gave it a 4, and 18% gave it a 5. So we're skewing slightly positive, but it looks like there's some room for improvement. So now I would like to just open it up for discussion. We'd like to hear from you all why you answered these questions the way you did. So if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Or you can put a comment in the chat, but sometimes the chat can kind of run away with a flurry of comments. So I'd like to, I'd say primarily hear from people, but please feel free to use the chat if that's more comfortable. Allie, please unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for doing this. And I tuned in late, so you may have already talked about this, but for me, I think overall this is very well written and I love the diversity of it. However, the biggest issue that I try to advocate for is the whole crushed stone piece of stuff that is not truly accessible to everyone with mobility challenges. And I know that this also quotes it being firm and stable, but the other part of ADA is also that it's unchanging. And while we're talking about nature, that can be very difficult to find, unless it's paved, right? That's really hard. but the way that it's often described is like if you can pick something up off of the ground that you're trying to traverse on, it's not accessible. So crushed stone, you know, someone with forearm crutches, or a walker or another device with smaller wheels, they get stuck. It pushes the stones out of the way. So personally, I would never consider crushed stone to be an accessible option, and it would ideally be something much firmer, and again, that unchanged piece as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any specific materials in mind that you have found to be more accessible?
Concrete pavement. And again, I know we're talking about nature, so I do think it would be amazing if we could in the Commonwealth have some paths that maybe they're at the beginning of nature's settings that are paved as concrete or asphalt. However, going deeper into nature, honestly, even though dirt itself can be unchanging, very, 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 very packed dirt without tons of divots, right? That's where the change part comes in. Really level, super packed dirt is more accessible than something like crushed stone.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah,
Sure.
we've heard throughout the process that what might be accessible for one person is not necessarily accessible for another person, which is why the definition of accessible trails is kind of, it really varies by the person. So thank you for sharing your perspective.
Sure.
Kate, please unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Kate. I am a wheelchair user and I have many other disabilities as well. And this entire process, I just want to say, is pretty inaccessible to people with cognitive disabilities. And you really need to look at plain language and run your language through a readability thing. I forget what they're called, but they're online. There's a bunch of them, and it will tell you what grade level you're aiming for, 5th grade or below, and to be accessible. And I just want to be out, how do I say, in like deep nature again, because I really, really miss it. And I want place it, like there should ideally be one in every town, because like the Fells is wicked close to me, but I can't go anywhere in the Fells, and it's a matter of equity to me. And I agree that very packed dirt is better than gravel, and I acknowledge that my power chair can go over a lot of stuff that a lot of people can't do. But I love going, how do I say this, just like deep and like by the ocean, and not just for a quarter mile, but for like a mile or 2 miles, so that when I invite somebody to go on a hike with me who is able-bodied, I want them to feel like they're going on a hike and not just like they're accompanying me on a hike, if that makes sense. Because it basically feels like people go with me out of pity and not because they expect to have a good time. And so I want it to be accessible, but not like, not
Right.
like,
Yeah, there's a desire for really being in nature and not just feeling like you're on a pathway.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing your perspective.
And I used this thing at Newberry somewhere. Okay, I forget what it was called. It was like a golf cart cross with a.
Kate, I want to make sure we have a chance
Yeah,
to
sorry.
hear from all those 3 hands, but thank you very much for sharing. Linda, please unmute. Linda, I'll go to Rowan and then I'll come back to you. So Rowan.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this work. Are you able to hear me? It looks
Yeah.
like the captions are picking up.
We can hear you.
A couple of additional requests. I would love to see comments in terms of available information online. I'm a service dog. I have a service dog, and while I know my service dog can accompany me in most places, I know sometimes trails are designated bird sanctuaries or have special wildlife protected areas. And there can be times where service dogs could be legally excluded potentially if it would disturb the wildlife. So it would be helpful to have that information. Definitely what public transit's accessible. I would love to see when there's events happening on public trails, or that there's a variety of timing for events. It would be helpful to know if these trails have areas that tend to stay muddy or collect water or puddles. I'm a part-time power chair user. My power chair cannot handle getting wet on the bottom. I also am someone who has a very difficult time navigating, even like from a parking lot to figuring out where a trail is, even though it seems obvious to the vast majority of people. In the past, I've used an app called What 3 Words that gives an address to every 10 square foot on Earth to direct me, even with a compass or integrating with other more common navigation apps, right to people. It's a great tool to find a group of friends or a specific door or a location outside. And I would love something like that, or an app that's similar to that. And the last thing I just want to say, I'm someone who unfortunately has frequent medical emergencies and has to make decisions about sometimes not going places if I couldn't get emergency help fast enough. And it would be helpful for me to know if there's cell phone service available to be able to make an emergency call, and how long emergency response time is in that area. Because obviously we have areas of the state where an ambulance would come in under 5 minutes, and out on the Cape, for instance, it could take over an hour. So thanks so much for doing this work.
Thank you, Rowan. I will say a lot of what you mentioned we have heard throughout this process and are including in our recommendations. So thank you for confirming that all of those issues are really important. Inez?
Hi, everyone. My name is Inez Ben Mokhtar. Thank you so much for this opportunity to chime in. There are definitely a lot of different needs in terms of accessibility as it pertains to trails. So I honor the work of the team and all of the participants here today that are shaping this draft recommendation. My worry is that in an effort to make trails accessible by clearing pathways, adding artificial features such as concrete, which was just mentioned, artificial lights, etc., we are actually losing what nature is actually about. So my question is, how can we find a balance between the two? I think it's important to remember throughout this process that the end goal is to give everyone access to real nature. And my concern regards that nature in a particularly vulnerable condition right now should be in its real form, and accessibility should be as minimally invasive, making sure that it's accessible to our future generations as well. So I wanted to add that point and just kind of re-emphasize my question is, how can we find a balance between these two demands?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as Meg said in her intro, the studies show that the more natural the environment, the greater the stress relieving benefit. So I think many people on our team are in agreement that keeping a place feeling as natural as possible is a big priority. But if others have thoughts about that, please chime in. Nicholas?
Thank you.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm pretty new to this process, so if I've thought of something that's already been addressed, my apologies. But I mostly work in pedestrian and bicycle planning, and I'm not disabled myself, so maybe what I'm thinking of isn't realistic or has already been considered. But for instance, when looking at bike share programs, I love to see options for adaptive bicycles to be rented out, or the Cycling Without Age program offers bicycles that folks can use either with assistance, or they offer adaptations. So I wonder if there are options with this Trail Network vision to also offer different kinds of adaptive equipment for trail visitors to be able to use, that might allow them to better access either shifting surfaces or uneven surfaces, which I don't know what that might look like. There's probably more research that I'm not aware of. I think of even wheelchairs that are at certain beaches that can allow users to roll on sand into the water and things like that. So I wonder if there might be options to supply these types of equipment to be able to rent or check out at certain parks, or to reserve in advance, and maybe that could be a piece of this trail vision as well. So that's what came to mind hearing some other folks make comments already. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's definitely come up as a priority, and it's something we're working on crafting recommendations for. Angela.
Hi, thanks for doing this. My daughter and I have a very small Instagram. We do reading hikeable trails for people with disabilities. She has a cognitive disability and a brain tumor. It makes her difficult for her to walk. So I'm usually pushing her on a trail. So I echo the idea of accessible equipment. We went and tested wheelchairs through Waypoint for an actual hiking chair, and they were amazing, but it's like $5,000 to get a hiking wheelchair. It's outrageous and not something most people just have to pay out of pocket. So the idea of being able to easily access that equipment at these trails. And then the number one thing my daughter complains about is the trails are always too short. And we will try and make it longer and see how far we can get her wheelchair. And inevitably there's a giant cherry root or something that we can't get past. So just the idea of maybe it's great to have something in every town, but also a variety of lengths. So it's not just feeling like, oh, yay, we got to go for 10 minutes. And we can go back and forth, but it's not nearly as fun as getting deeper in the woods.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Angela. Lisa?
Good evening, everybody. I'd just like to thank everyone for their continuous work on this particular topic. I represent the Westport Disabilities Commission for ADA, and I am one of the commissioners. And I think what will help everyone moving forward, it might be a good way to get balance, is when you're putting out the questions to see who is actually voting that is actually disabled versus someone who is not disabled, rather than having everyone in a general question. And I do think having handicap accessibility, obviously they have other challenges that would allow them to enjoy those, the trails. And I'm sure that they would welcome the opportunity to participate on the trails depending on their type of disability. I will emulate one of the colleagues that talked about crushed stone. It is unsafe. There is a whole host of issues when you're dealing with an uneven type of surface. And those types of challenges, really, you have to look at individually. And how accessible do you want to make them for people that have disabilities? And I think that if there can be a clear description with regards to people who are disabled, would allow them to participate on that particular trail, in the description, inviting them to come to enjoy that particular trail, knowing that the challenges that they may or may not have. But I want to thank everyone for doing what they're doing, and I just think it's amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
One thing I just want to jump in to say.
I never. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. This is Meg Bandera, by the way, from Unpaved Trails for All. And one of the things I think I love hearing all of the comments and the viewpoints and the feedback that everybody is giving. This engagement is fantastic and I love to hear it. But I think it's a good thing to just point out that right now, many of our accessible trails are deficient. So when I hear folks who've had issues and trouble and barriers in soft surface, a lot of the soft surfaces that are being used are not the correct surface right now. And it's one of the things that we're talking about as a group. So it's really important to hear from folks who have had trouble and to hear from folks who want natural experiences, who don't want natural experiences, who want something like concrete and pavement, because what we're really trying to narrow in on is the need for a spectrum of trails that will address a variety of abilities, so that there's a trail that meets everyone's needs and that everyone sees themselves as being an outdoor person if they want to be an outdoor person. So I just want to put that in there.
Thank you, Meg. And then I think there's also some questions in the chat about how we're defining accessible trails and what makes a trail accessible. And Meg has been helpful to chime in that from a trail design perspective, there's this set of guidelines called the Forest Service Trail Accessibility Guidelines, which is currently used by many organizations as the standard for designing an accessible trail. But I think many trail users would also share that those guidelines do not truly make a trail accessible necessarily. The grade might be too steep, it might not be wide enough. So that's sort of the common standard. But in this project, we're sort of thinking about accessible trails as trails that are accessible to people. And that's going to vary by the person. And that's part of what we're talking about tonight.
Hello, I couldn't unmute and I'd like to speak when you can give me a chance. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Linda, do you wanna go ahead?
Yes. I'm Linda. I'm deafblind. And I didn't get to answer any of the questions because it was hard to hear my screen reader and read the questions plus hear the presentation. So I tried on the computer and I tried on the iPhone, and it just seemed like your website's all that accessible. But what I'd like to say specifically is I live near a trail. There's a trail right in back of my apartment complex at the Coolidge at Sudbury. I'm talking about the Mass Central Rail Trail. And, you know, I live in a retirement community and there's people with walkers and wheelchairs, you know, and over 65, yada, yada. So, but anyway, it's hard to get to the trail because there's a fence there and stuff. And you have to go through a lot of ruts and obstacles and to get to it. So I wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And I'm sorry, the poll was not accessible. And if you have any other feedback about the vision, we would love to hear from you now or later. Jen, would you like to share?
Hi, I hear a lot of different opinions that seem like they're opposite, but I think there's actually, like what Meg said about that spectrum, you know, like we might have some trails that are like really rough nature, you know, and so those might not be able to be accessible, but then, you know, I can, you know, I see like all sides of it. And like I have epilepsy, so I can walk, but I can see, you know, I'm gonna get older. I might not be able to walk forever. And like I can't get places right now is my problem. You know, I can't drive. And since the last meeting you guys had, I went to Hopkinton State Park with my boyfriend and I saw there's a train there. Like it's about a mile away. A lot of people, I don't know if like that mile is handicapped accessible or not. But you know, I didn't know about it and I called the train, you know, like the metro, whatever it is, and they were like, this is the train you're calling. And I was like, yeah, I'd like to know more about which places I can get to, you know, by transportation. And they were like, I don't know, you know, like it would be good to know lots of places to go, and like I can see the point about concrete is hot. I have to walk to work and it's hot. So I can see that side of it. We don't want to scare away animals, but we also want everyone to be able to go. And somebody said about like feeling like people are just bringing them because they feel sorry for them. I feel that way too sometimes. Like you want the people that are coming with you to enjoy too. Like Hopkinton has the boating, and I was like, let's go to the boating, and yeah, like you want everybody to enjoy, not just the person that needs to be on that trail. You want everyone to enjoy the trail. And I don't want to leave anyone out of this, because I think that Meg's thing about a spectrum, I think that's the best way to say it, because I see all these different viewpoints, and I think they don't have to be against each other.
Mhm. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, for reflecting that complexity experiences.
Quickly, I just wanted to read that Amber said that to Linda, that some folks in Sudbury are working with DCR on developing an access point to the Mass Central Rail Trail from your building. So that might happen soon. And reading that because I know that Linda is blind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. So Bill and Marianne, I want to be sure we hear from you, but I also want to keep moving and talk about our draft recommendations. And then is it okay if we come back and hear from you after we present these recommendations?
Sure.
Or you can leave a comment in the chat. All right. Peter, I pass it to you.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, this is Peter Flinker again. And so we've been doing a lot of sort of talking, and this is the second public forum, gather information. And as Meg said, this has really been wonderful, just listening to all the comments and the ideas. And we're going to continue doing that. But what we're turning toward now with the working group is really to shape a series of recommendations that will kind of make that vision real. And then to start thinking about, well, what order do we need to do those different tasks, and how do the recommendations actually get us to a vision 10 years from now of a wonderful, accessible trail system across the state. So this is a start. And we have tonight just a very abbreviated list of recommendations, but we wanted to give you kind of the outline and see if you have any comments about whether that incorporates the different things that we've already heard about tonight. So you want to go to the next slide, Shane. So the first sort of category of recommendations is in standards, practice, and design, which is, again, not a very accessible phrase, but it's basically talk about, can we have common design standards for the way trails are designed and how they're designed in terms of process and what they're made of, so that when we're describing trails 10 years from now, everyone knows what to expect. So the first recommendation in this category is to center lived experience of those with disabilities at every step of the process in terms of designing, but also reviewing and redesigning trails. And we've had some great experiences doing that this summer already. And then the second part is establishing those standards across the state, and then publishing a common resource of best practices that people can refer to. And sort of, there's a lot of great information out there already, but this is kind of pulling it together, vetting it with folks in Massachusetts, and really making it something that's our collective standard and our collective resource that everybody can refer to. And then finally, in terms of design, I think we're really emphasizing access to nature on natural surface trails, and then making those sustainable by using forms of natural surfacing that come from nearby and also are going to hold up and not fall apart. Just quickly, there's been a lot of discussion in the chat about crushed stone, and I know we had crushed stone in the vision, but that really goes synonymous with what you may think about as stone dust, which is a crushed stone product, very fine material. And what we're working on, part of the standards, is sort of common shared mix of stone, crushed stone, that'll be packed down really well because it contains a mix of fine and somewhat coarser material and is very easy to walk on and roll on. And we know from experience that there are trails that have been successfully designed and built, and we're going to build on that experience and try to figure out how do we make that happen with every trail and make it last as long as possible. So the second set of recommendations is about the design of the trail system and the user experience. I think one of the things we've heard and heard again tonight is we need a robust, accessible trail system, which means that it's common, it's close to where people live, it's widespread across the state, and it provides the amenities and features that people need. So it's robust both in terms of it's common and easy to access, but also, as we heard tonight, they're long enough and they provide access to real nature experiences. Second part of that is making trail accessibility information clear and available to everyone, and then helping people get to trails by facilitating transportation. The third set of recommendations on the next slide is stewardship. One of the things we're realizing after looking at a number of trails and talking to lots of people this summer is that maintenance is really important for natural surface trails in natural settings. We know we can build a trail, a concrete trail that goes like a road through the woods and make it something that hardly needs any maintenance at all, but that's really not what we want when we're talking about access to nature. So one of the things, again, that's going to be part of the recommendations is what maintenance process is necessary to make a beautiful natural surface trail in a natural setting hold up from year to year. And that might include recommendations for annual maintenance, emergency maintenance, and so on. The second part of that is, paying for maintenance, which is hard now because there's often grants for construction, but not for maintenance. And then no town DPW director or park director wants to be saddled with more work to do. So the question is, how can we find financial support for accessible trails, and how do we build those funding strategies into the system? And then finally, to reduce administrative and regulatory barriers to building new trails so that accessible trails are as easy to build as other more common trails where typically it's volunteers going out and just sweeping off a path through the woods. One of the barriers with accessible trails is they have to be built more robustly, and that means you run up into wetlands regulations and other barriers that make it harder. So part of this is trying to figure that out. And then finally, final set of recommendations is building support and awareness of trails, which doesn't go to a lot of detail here, but basically raising awareness of both the benefits of trails so that people value them and will want to help pay for them and build them and maintain them, but also raising awareness among the decision makers of why that's important. So these are sort of, again, the 4 categories of standards. And I think, do we have some more poll questions, Shane?
Yes, we do. One moment. Kessel. Thank you. All right. The question is, do you think this list of recommendations, if applied, would achieve our vision? And the first answer is not at all. Second is somewhat. Third is yes. And fourth is no opinion. And if you're having any difficulty completing the poll, you can unmute yourself or write in the chat.
Faith.
Did someone say something?
Faith.
Kessel, can you share the, oh, I can do it actually. So 2% said not at all, 50% said somewhat, 43% said yes, and 4% didn't have an opinion. So I'm glad we're kind of in the somewhat yes ballpark.
Hmm.
And Kessel, can you put up the second question? Okay, so this says, for those who identify as having a disability, which of these recommendations are most important to you personally? And here you can select all that apply. So the first one is center lived experience. The second is establish statewide standards and build a common resource of best practices. The third is use natural, accessible, and sustainable trail surfacing materials. The fourth is plan a robust, accessible trail system. Then make trail accessibility information clear and available to all. The sixth is facilitate transportation to trails. The seventh is ensure ongoing accessibility through proper maintenance. The eighth is explore funding strategies to ensure ongoing financial support for accessible trails. The ninth is reduce administrative and regulatory barriers to building new trails. And the 10th and last one is raise awareness of the benefits of trails to both trail users and decision makers. And again, this question is intended for those who identify as having a disability.
And you may have noticed that there's a lot of questions on this, and they disappear at the bottom of the box. So you can scroll down to see all the questions. You can also drag the corners of the box to make it bigger.
Yes, thank you.
Let us know if you can't see them all.
And again, you can select all that apply.
And in a few minutes, we're going to have some more options, some more time for discussion. So make a note of anything you want to bring up again, because we really want to get a sense both of, are we on the right track in terms of recommendations? What are we missing? And then what should our priorities be, if any?
Okay, I will end the poll. And again, if you're not able to complete the poll using a screen reader, you can type your answer into the chat or say it out loud. You don't need to raise your hand. So I think I'll read the top four, maybe. So 71% of people said that ensuring ongoing accessibility through proper maintenance is most important to them personally. 67% said exploring funding strategies to ensure ongoing financial support for trails. And 67% also said making trail accessibility information clear and available to all. And 67% also said use natural, accessible, and sustainable trail surfacing materials. So the top one was maintenance, and then funding and information and surfacing were all sort of tied for number two. The one that has the least support on this list is facilitating transportation to trails. That's interesting. Okay, and Kessel, can you put up the final one? So this is a question for trail managers and builders, since I know we have some of them in the room. Which of these recommendations do you think are most feasible to implement? And it's the same list of 10 recommendations. So center lived experience, establish statewide standards and build a common resource of best practices, use natural, accessible, and sustainable trail surfacing materials, plan a robust, accessible trail system, make trail accessibility information clear and available to all, facilitate transportation to trails, ensure ongoing accessibility through proper maintenance, explore funding strategies to ensure ongoing financial support for accessible trails, and reduce administrative and regulatory barriers to building new trails. And lastly, raise awareness of the benefits of trails. We have a comment in the chat, without transportation to trails, the other issues become irrelevant. That's a good point. And while people answer that, I'll read another comment from the chat from Bill, who didn't get to speak earlier. Make an even stronger vision of connecting people from their residences to the accessible trails. Saying plan within 20 miles would be strengthened by having vision for integrating with public transportation. Yes, and public transportation is something that we do talk about kind of in the sub-bullets of that recommendation, and solve use cases involving a person discovering existence of suitable trail of interest and how they get from their doorstep to the trailhead. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people might not know a trail exists. So the first problem to solve is helping them learn about it, and then how to get there. Thank you for your comments, Bill. All right, so I'll give you all one more minute. Okay, we'll end the poll. And it looks like in the lead, we have 69% of trail builders and managers saying that making trail accessibility information clear and available to all will be very feasible to implement, followed by 50% saying using natural, accessible, and sustainable trail surfacing materials, followed by establishing statewide standards and building a common resource of best practices. So thank you for sharing your perspectives. All right, is there anything missing from this list of recommendations? And you all, I'll stop sharing the poll. You all are welcome to raise your hand or put a comment in the chat. Is anything missing from this list?
And Shane, if there's anyone still waiting from the first round to speak, it might be good.
Oh, yes. Bill, you had written a comment in the chat, but did you want to add anything else?
No, you read the one comment. I had a second comment that had to do with after hearing people speak about, sort of wanting longer trails or, different levels of difficulty. It sparked in my mind, class 1, 2, 3 rapids or, green, blue, black ski trails, that sort of thing. But I would put more weight on the opinions of and suggestions of those people with who identify with disabilities than myself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, classification is definitely a topic that we were talking about a lot. And Marianne, you had your hand raised earlier. Did you still want to say anything?
I think you've really addressed it with the make trail accessibility information clear and available to all. I was kind of riffing off of what Meg had said, that there's different accessibility trails. I like the green, blue, black kind of, at least distinguishing between. Just make sure that if it's paved, it says paved. If it's crushed stone dust, great. Say that. If it's crushed stone, which I hope it never will be, say that, so that people are really clear about determining for themselves whether or not it's accessible for them. Different levels of accessibility. So, but I think you've covered that, but that was my point.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
All right. Anyone else, particularly anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Is this list missing anything? Yes, Allie.
Hi again. Thank you so much for all of the explanations. And maybe just considering in this draft recommendations, especially with the first bullet that says center lived experience, maybe just adding the word diverse somewhere. Because that seems to be a big part of the discussion this evening about how clearly everything's different for everyone. And it's important to have the diversity, both of different trails and of different people's experience. Because I think my biggest concern in all of this is the Commonwealth saying, oh, there was all these conversations and this was the single thing that they said was best, when there's a huge population of people going, oh, shoot, no, that really doesn't work for me. but then professionals who are doing the building and the grants and whatnot say, well, they said so. So I think the diversity is really important. I actually got a little offended when the description recently, the presentation just said, walking on stone dust is easy. It's not for everyone. So I think the word diverse is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? I will admit I have not been able to keep up with the chat, so apologies if I've missed any comments. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is not exactly my area of expertise, but I live in the Boston area, and I liked the comment about the need to coordinate with transit, or sometimes the state intersects with municipality sections, how to really think in terms of a network. I know you don't control what you don't control, but the communication is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you raise a great point. Jen?
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I put it in the chat, but you said you haven't been able to keep up with, you said facilitate transportation to trails. Maybe you could say public transportation. Like that's pretty vague. Like a lot of people will just think that means the road to the trail, you know, like public transportation and different, like, you know, there's trails in your community. It's great. You can go there every week, but people with disabilities still want to explore and go different places, you know, and so like facilitate transportation to trails is kind of short, like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And also I had the idea in my head of like there's people that want to go in nature and like they climb up the rock face, you know what I mean? Most
Mm-hmm.
people don't do that. That's great they do that. You know what I mean? We don't want to take that away from them by having, you know, disabled trail. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm talking about, the spectrum. But that's it.
Yeah, thank you. And just FYI, these are sort of like the headers for our recommendations, and each of these recommendations will have, you know, like 4 or 5 more specific recommendations below them. And public transportation has been a big part of the input we've received. And so we'll be trying to craft recommendations that work towards solutions for getting people to trails. And definitely, if on all of these subjects, if anyone has specific ideas about how to implement these recommendations, we would love to hear from you. Yes, David.
From the previous meeting, our town has been working on trying to figure out which trails we should focus on for upgrading. And there are a lot of competing design ideas here. It'd be helpful if there was some kind of way of helping us prioritize what a community needs first when we're doing out a longer term plan. We basically have no guidance on that. It's the loudest voice in the community gets the attention.
Right. Can you say more about what you mean by that, like figuring out what the community needs?
We have 8 trails in town in various portions that meet some of the criteria here and would be reasonably easy upgrades, but we have limited resources and maintenance capabilities. And the hard part is figuring out for us what's the highest priority to get started on, to get the community involved with and get people excited about going forward with this. And we have no real good way of saying, oh yeah, this trail is more important than another trail.
Mhm.
Or this trail is more important, but it takes more work. Sorting all kind of that formal decision when we're going to actually spend money and do things.
Right. Yeah, so I'm hearing maybe there's a need for kind of like a tool to help you discern a tool to help you discern like which trails would be most easily upgraded to being accessible.
That or some kind of point
less
system
connected, yeah.
saying a community wants so many feet of this type of trail for this population and so many feet of that type of trail.
Mhm.
So we have better guidance on where to prioritize our work.
Mhm. Great, thank you for that.
Hello, I know I spoke before, but is there any way that you can, in the future for meetings, to maybe email a survey or something so that people, maybe not just for me or other people as well, that have that are deafblind or have screen reader access issues can, fill the survey out and send it?
Yeah, I can email a survey. If you used your email to register for this event, which I think you had to do, I can email you and maybe all participants a survey in case they weren't able to complete the poll.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
I guess one question I had, obviously it's really important to involve people with lived experience, but going forward, what's the best way to make that happen in different towns? Since obviously part of the problem is connecting people to their local trail builders and designers and planners and getting involved in the project. Does anybody have any recommendations for the best way to do that? Both to sort of continue this statewide discussion, but also locally where it may not be happening. Allie.
Thank you so much for asking that. Yes, there's a couple of us on here that are chairpersons of our town's Commission on Disabilities. And I think that would be a fantastic place to start is like, I'm in Franklin, so we have one. Some towns don't have one yet, but if they do, I think that would be a really helpful way to connect with the Commission on Disability who speaks on behalf of the community at large or can connect a little bit better to the community.
Where do the local commissions on disability get their information? Like,
do you mind clarifying that question?
Well, in terms of if a state office, such as the Office of Outdoor Recreation, wanted to reach out, how does that happen?
Sure. So a town website would have the commission listed.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I guess so. If anybody has a better idea.
There is not really a one-stop shop for contacting all of the commissions on disability. If there was, I would have reached them all already.
Although the website of the Mass Office on Disability, if you search in there, like Massachusetts Commission on Disabilities, they do have hopefully an updated list of any legal commissions in the Commonwealth and the contact information of each of those chairpersons or commissions.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to
one suggestion I might have on that one. I raised my hand was I guess I'm speaking as just a volunteer for the org Waypoint Adventure, which I know partners with DCR on the Universal Access Program. But given that such a diverse community of people with different disabilities come to Waypoint and the DCR programs, maybe appealing to that population to try to bring them into these discussions, is maybe an action we could take.
One more comment. I want to reiterate what Ally said. One of the best things to do is to contact the Massachusetts Office of Disability. It has a list of all the current commissions on disability, and we get most of our information that way. Our trainings, any new workshops that might be happening, and that's a great way to get the people involved. And then the local commission on disability can get their local towns involved. We have a land trust organization in town that puts trails together, and they've actually put one all-access trail for us, but as many have commented here, it's very short. So it'd be great to get together with them, like these different groups that are in town, and work together. And I think to get an all-volunteer group of people that would be interested in helping to make more trails accessible will really work well. People will come out if you ask them.
Thanks.
Carlton? Oh.
I can't raise my hand, so when...
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Fanny.
Sorry.
And then Carlton will get to you.
Okay, I just wanted to say that in terms of maybe we need a different discussion for people who have sensory disabilities, because I think that they are a different category. But one thing I would say, if we even talk about surfaces, you want to keep in mind cane users, because canes can easily get stuck in crevices, for example.
That's a great point. And that was something we were finding during our trail visits as well. Are there any other specific considerations that you would like to mention before we go to next?
I remember we covered some in the last meeting, so I imagine, even though you didn't discuss them in this meeting, you did take, to make the list. It would be hard to reproduce. But one point I made in the chat is, having beacons that can describe the area to people with visual impairment, where they are, describe maybe what the trail looks like, how many miles, whatever, but what the terrain is like. But yeah, to have more auditory places where people can stop. And when you talk about tactile, Braille or something, the person has to know that it's there. So that's another thing that you would want to let users, blind users, know at the beginning, that there'll be some way of knowing that at such and such a juncture, there'll be some tactile information or another beacon or whatever.
Those are all great points. Yes, I would say those are definitely things that are on our radar. Additionally, we've heard that it can be, once you get to the trail, it can be hard to find the exact trailhead. So having some kind of way to just have someone help you find the trailhead, because the trail might be designed for.
But not just that. If
right.
you go as far as to have tactile information, including Braille or some raised map that would be interesting to have the lay of the land, the assuming that you have beacons along the path, because the geography will change, the vista will change, the what sort of birds or other nature plants are around will change. So you want to have these beacons in, scattered throughout the trail, but you either want to have some device where it automatically speaks to you, sort of like when you're in a museum, or you need some way of letting people know that there's going to be a tactile thing, and how you would do that, that's another issue. But to just put them there, lots of places put Braille, but you have to know where the Braille is to know that there's even Braille, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And you had said that maybe the conversation about sensory disabilities is part of a separate conversation, but I do want to just really reiterate that that's very much a part of this project. And
okay, great.
If you have any other suggestions or things you think we should be thinking about, please do share them.
Okay.
Carlton?
I thank you very much. It's very, very interesting meeting. First time I've joined this. I'm part of the Community Preservation Committee here in Bridgewater. A couple of points. The elder affairs contacts have been mentioned, but senior centers oftentimes will have, they serve a lot of folks too. And so contacting senior centers might be another way. And the other thing I was going to suggest is that I really like what the lady just said. Auditory. We've got a small nonprofit park in town that we want to put an accessible trail in, but we wanted to have smells and odor, that kind of thing, flower beds, that kind of thing for those folks. And I think what she said, having some kind of auditory, solar-driven microphone that they can speak into and that kind of thing would be really great. But I just wanted to add to the fact that senior centers would be another great place, and actually contacting the CPCs, since we do provide funding for this kind of thing, or can. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Carlton. Is there anyone who said something in the chat which we haven't picked up on, who would like to reiterate that aloud or repost it in the chat so I can be sure to say to the group? I'm sorry I haven't been able to read all of these messages.
Oh, it's a lot of good ideas. I guess we can also sort of raise our sights a little bit and ask sort of more general questions of, are we on the right track? Is this the right approach to creating a robust statewide accessible trail system? As you can tell, it's a pretty traditional sort of planning process, which it sort of needs to be, coordinating a lot of people and then trying to put together a set of recommendations that people can agree on. But because this hasn't been done, to any great extent across the state before, and because this process is still evolving, there's legislation underway, which hopefully will move forward to support it. Certainly, we'd love to hear if anybody has more creative ideas that are outside the box of traditional planning, or if you have any other ideas that sort of on the high level.
This is Carlton Hunt. Have you gone to the regional planning authorities and talked with them a little about this whole issue and bring them into the process?
We have a number of representatives of different staff from the RPAs represented on the working group. And I think the leadership, Paul and the other leaders, are working closely with a lot of the planning agencies as well. But yeah, I mean, that's a good example. I mean, part of this is, who's doing the planning now? You have local open space plans being done, recreation plans, and then you have the regional planning agencies doing a lot of the work. So we want to make make accessible trail planning part of what everybody is doing on an ordinary basis. David, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, just a quick one. You all did a tour of various sites in Massachusetts. It would be really helpful if you could put up a page with the best of things that you liked from each of the trails, whether it was a sign or how a trail was made, or unique access portions, so that we can emulate it elsewhere.
Yeah, that process of emulation and sort of documenting what works. It's like I indicated earlier, it's like we've been on, crushed stone or stone dust trails around the state that seem to be holding up really well. And so we're trying to figure out how can we standardize whatever approach they took there and make it work in more places. Inez.
Yes, I just wanted to say yes, I do think this draft recommendation is off to the right start. I think what becomes incredibly difficult is, kind of developing a standard when we have so many different needs there. So that's, borderline impossible, because there can't be a standard, to meet all of those different needs. But I think some of the points that was mentioned today in terms of making sure we have a spectrum is definitely what I would consider the right start. I think, what would be important now is to kind of focus on this initiative almost like an experiment, depending on community response. I think including tribal communities might also be a great idea that hasn't been mentioned yet. just because I think tribal organizations, are very familiar with natural spaces and how to get people to reconnect, how to stimulate, sensories senses that have been brought up in these conversations. So I think that might be a way to collect information and do more prior research on what would be ideal and an ideal way of moving forward. But yeah, I think it is off to a great start, and I think it was definitely a lot of work, I can tell. So I just want to thank you and the team for all your hard work on this.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? We're getting, David Foss writes, creating an outline of best management practices for trail design is a key action item. These BMPs can be used by future trail developers. Yeah, that really seems like core recommendation.
And someone says, has there been any contact with tourism agencies? That's a great question. I personally am not aware. But yes, as we touched on in our presentation, that's definitely a growing field.
Yeah, the importance of tourism to Massachusetts obviously is really important, and all kinds of trails and accessible trails as well. Bill has his hand up.
Yeah, just one other thought in passing. When I hear the word standards, and things that come to mind are, the building inspector in your town, has to sign off before you get your occupancy permit, or the Board of Health health inspector has to sign off before a restaurant can do business. I don't know if this effort or other efforts, maybe across the country somewhere, sort of have yes, this is a certified accessible trail, and what are the things the check boxes you have to have for an inspection in order to receive that certification. Just brainstorming, that's all.
Yeah, we've been talking about it. Certainly we don't want to add another layer of regulation, but I think the important thing is to have predictability. So the standards are, I guess, the base of the standards is to get trails that when people read about how a trail is described, they know what to expect, and when they get there, it actually is what has been advertised. Martin.
Sorry, guys, one more thing. I'm also on the Commission of Disability in Westport, along with Lisa, who's here. I am the vice chair. And one thing that we got involved with is the Audubon Society in our town has made their trails all access, and they're really big into making all the trails all access across the state. So they may be a good resource to tap into. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is when I was trying to help our local land trust make an all access trail for us here in Westport, I did some searching around of trails as well. And I went to Watertown. Watertown is an incredible trail, especially for the blind. They have a guide wire that goes all around. And what they do is put cubes, like block cubes, to let the blind person know that a Braille post is coming up with some information on the natural habitat or whatever that may be. It was amazing. The posts are granite. I mean, I think Watertown has quite a bit of money. So they really know how to put a trail together, but great ideas of how to make it accessible for those who are sight impaired. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're always looking for good examples, things to be emulated, places we should visit. And love to hear more. If you have them, let us know.
And some good comments in the chat. Safety regulations are key. Yes, of course. If Lisa, if you want to speak to specific safety concerns that you have, also would love to hear more from you. And part of communication should also include specific information about accessible bathrooms and accessible parking, with not just a street name. Absolutely. I will say we have heard that a lot. It can be really hard to find a trailhead sometimes, including on the trail visits we have been on this summer. And then someone asks if there's a map showing where the accessible trails are located. There was some chit chat about this in the chat earlier. So we have kind of a draft map showing the trails that we are aware of, but it's far from comprehensive and it's missing a lot of information. But that is one of the hoped for outcomes of this project, is the creation of a ongoing trail database and map that is easy for people to find detailed information about a trail they want to visit and look across the state and see all the options that are out there. So that's one of the goals for our project, but unfortunately it's still kind of in draft form. But the Massachusetts Office of Outdoor Recreation does have kind of a list of accessible trails on their website, which I can link to, just of trails on state parks and such.
Excuse me, Shane, we have some hands raised. There's, why don't we start with Lisa?
Lisa.
Hello again. I think that she actually beat me to the question with regards to a list, obviously in our great state of Massachusetts, but also maybe to consider, based on this overwhelming response in this great address of everything that you're trying to achieve, is maybe do an evaluation. There might be people that are participating on your meeting that might want to go and visit and evaluate, a trail that's near to them, so that we can get, some firsthand feedback depending on that person's challenge or disability or no disability, and maybe do like an evaluation checklist, or, maybe document their experience, because it might only be maybe a couple of miles from them or in their town. And based on how extensive the list is, it might give a firsthand experience feedback back to your group. It's just a suggestion.
A very good one, thank you. Then Louise.
Hi there. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, my head is kind of spinning. There's so many great things to think about here, but I wonder if it's possible for the Mass website to host a button, a tab that would say which trails around the state could use volunteers to come by and participate in trail days and trail maintenance days. It's like I'm in Belchertown. There is no funding for the trail, and there's no appetite for adding to either the DPW or the rec department's budgets. So desperately seeking volunteers. Volunteers are out in the community, but they don't know how to find us. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility, that that this could be a forum for volunteers to connect with organizations who need them.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think volunteers are going to continue to be key to making this happen, and maintaining a system of trails that is robust.
All right, so thank you all so much again for all this really great input and feedback, and we hope that this is just one step and the conversation can continue as we move forward. If you would like to provide any additional feedback, you can submit a comment on the Trails for All webpage, and I'll put a link to that in the chat. One moment. Oh, thank you, Kessel. Or you can email me at info@dodsonflinker.com. That's DODSONFLINKER.com. And then after we close out of this meeting, there will be a survey if you'd like to share any feedback about this meeting in particular or the project. And then we also just wanted to flag an upcoming event, which you all might be interested in. It's the Trails for All hike, and it's coming up on September 26th at Belle Isle Marsh Reservation. And I will put information about that in the chat, and you can find more on Facebook. But any other final comments before we sign off for the night?
Someone asked what the next steps were.
Great question. The next steps are, we're going to take all this great feedback from tonight and fold them into our recommendations as we continue working with our working group to refine those over the next few months. And then we're working on, we'll ultimately have kind of a final report, which will be the product of this project. And that will be coming out sometime in March of next year. So we hope you'll stay tuned. You can follow along on the Trails for All website. And yes, continue to submit comments and email us if you have anything else to add.
And Shane, there was a request in the chat for that contact information to go out
Oh,
by
yes.
email. Yeah.
Yes, I will send it out with my email to participants. All right, thank you all so much. Hope you have a nice evening.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.